Welcome to Cinecaps. Today I will show you a mystery, drama, thriller film from 2023 titled Leave the World Behind. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Brooklyn, New York. Clay wakes up confused and asks his wife Amanda why she's packing. She starts venting about her job and both of them being anxious and reveals she's rented a house for a spontaneous vacation with the kids. As they haven't done it for a while, he's down. On their way, Archie is already zoning out in the back playing video games, while Rose watches Friends on her tablet. Amanda looks relieved to be escaping the city. They reach a large house in a quiet, sparsely populated area where they can finally unwind from the city's chaos. The kids are already having fun in the pool and Clay observes how happy they seem. Amanda pops into town for some groceries and while loading bags in the trunk, she notices a man seemingly preparing for the apocalypse and gives him a faint smile. Later, the entire family heads to the beach for a day of relaxation. However, their peace is interrupted by a massive oil tanker rapidly approaching. They manage to get out of the way last minute and as they evacuate, a cop mentions that similar groundings have occurred elsewhere and are linked to malfunctions in navigation systems. Back at the house, Amanda tries to read up on it, but the Wi-Fi is down and the TV isn't working either. Fortunately, the kids have seemingly already forgotten about the incident. Amanda spots some deer in the backyard and Clay notes it to be a good omen. Late at night, with the kids already asleep, they try to unwind with some Jenga and wine, but they're startled by an unexpected knock at the door. A man profusely apologizes for the disturbance and introduces himself as George, the home's owner, along with his daughter Ruth. Clay invites them in and George explains that they experienced a blackout in the city. They live on the 14th floor and he has a bad knee so they decided to drive to their house instead. George is exceedingly polite and apologetic throughout the conversation, but Ruth interjects with snarky reminders that it is, in fact, their house. George offers them a refund which Amanda misunderstands as being asked to leave, but he clarifies, offering a 50% refund to let them stay in the basement. Clay readily agrees, but Amanda remains skeptical. They go to discuss it privately and Amanda, not having much faith in people, feels they have ill intentions, but Clay convinces her to be reasonable. George offers Clay a drink and they have a pleasant conversation, but Amanda remains on high alert, interrogating George and asking to see his ID, just to be safe, but George has lost his wallet. They're suddenly interrupted by a national emergency broadcast on every channel and Ruth suggests that the blackout might be a symptom of something bigger. Unsure of what this all could mean, Clay proposes they get some rest and figure out their next steps in the morning. Ruth is annoyed they have to sleep in the basement of their own home and expresses her desire to get them out. George suggests they need to reassure them that everything will be alright, to which Ruth questions whether he knows more than he's letting on. Amanda is still angry about Ruth's snarky comments and points out how there's no family pictures in the house, but Clay reasons that they probably take them down when renting the house. After they pass out, the TV glitches and briefly shows a news story about a cyber attack. In the morning the internet and TV still aren't working so Rose keeps yapping about not being able to watch Friends. Amanda checks her phone and discovers notifications about the blackout being caused by hackers. Clay decides to go into town later to hopefully figure out what's going on. Rose is annoyed that Clay can't fix the TV so she goes to sit by the pool and a bunch of deer show up again, just standing there. Amanda tells Ruth and George about the notifications and he suggests it might have been some teenagers, just messing around. Ruth is worried about her mom who's supposed to be on a flight home and George assures her she is probably fine. He decides to visit a neighbor's house few miles down the road, in case they're home. Driving around without GPS, Clay is completely lost. When he steps out of the car to look for cell signal, the radio finds a muffled news broadcast detailing the cyber attack causing catastrophic environmental disasters and impacting animal migration patterns. Meanwhile, Rose tells Archie about the deer she saw earlier, but he's preoccupied testing out his phone's camera. She wants to see what else is out there and heads into the woods. After some wandering around, they find a shed and Rose starts yapping about deer again. Feeling unheard, she expresses her belief that no one cares about anything she says and Archie confirms her suspicions. While heading back, Archie is bitten by a bug. Rose spots a house and suggests exploring it but Archie is hungry, so they keep going. Arriving at the neighbor's house, George checks his messages to his wife, none of which have been delivered, revealing he is actually worried. Stepping out of the car, he sees luggage scattered around the yard. He searches the garage and finds a case containing a satellite phone, but even that doesn't work. Making his way to the beach, George finds a plane wreckage with bodies scattered around. As he's taking it all in, another plane approaches, and he barely manages to retreat back to the house. Still mindlessly driving around, Clay stumbles upon a woman on the side of the road, begging for help. He stops to see what he can do, but the lady is frantically speaking Spanish and neither of them understand each other. Her increasing agitation freaks Clay out so he just dips, leaving the panicked woman stranded. Not long after, Clay sees a drone with red smoke coming out of it. He tries to get away, but the drone eventually catches up and the red smoke turns out to be a bunch of flyers instead. George is back at the house and tells Amanda that while looking at the stock market a while back, he saw something unusual and suspected something like this coming. The whole point of a satellite phone is that it's always supposed to have a signal, unless the satellites are knocked out. Amanda thinks he's getting a little carried away, until he mentions the plane crashing in front of his eyes. Their pleasant small talk is interrupted by distant explosions and they're suddenly hit by an ear-piercing noise, which prompts Amanda to immediately rush outside to look for the kids. A while later the noise has stopped and Amanda reunites with them. Clay also finally returns and shows them the flyer. Archie says the writing means death to America, he's seen it in a video game. George feels something doesn't add up. Why would they be dropping flyers in a foreign language which most people wouldn't understand? But the family have experienced enough and decide to drive to some relatives, hoping it's safe there. After driving for a while without seeing a single living soul, they hit a roadblock. Amanda goes out to investigate and notices that all the crashed cars are brand new. Clay sees another Tesla approaching and intends to flag it down, but Amanda puts 2 and 2 together and rushes back to their car. They barely manage to avoid the first car, and then a dozen more. Seeing as the only way out of town is blocked, they end up back at the house. They try to figure out what to do next, but nobody has any good ideas. Clay tries to be useful by filling up the tub for drinking water. Ruth offers him some CBD vape and they go out to the patio. After some chatting, Clay shares his encounter with the woman in the middle of nowhere, confessing that she needed help but he just left her. He also tells her about the oil tanker which grounded on the beach. He didn't tell them earlier because he was scared of what it could mean. Clay believes in the end they will be alright, but the mention of it potentially being an invasion freaks Ruth out. The conversation ends when a flock of flamingos decides to land in the pool. Amanda and George discuss their respective jobs and she apologizes for her initial treatment of him. They share some jokes, lightening the mood, and Amanda is starting to like George. She finally asks why he actually came to the house. He recounts a story from a few years back about one of his clients inviting him to a private event. This client is a well-known businessman primarily involved in defense contracting and the most influential person George has ever met. They had a great time, thoroughly enjoying themselves and becoming quite intoxicated. He started telling George how much he likes him and how he wished he could invite him to a trip he was about to go on. The trip? A meeting with his evil cabal who runs the world. The friend was known to make jokes like that. And then, yesterday, the same friend called him up out of the blue asking him to move some of his money around, way more than usual. George asked if he's meeting with his evil cabal again, but this time the friend doesn't laugh. Instead he tells him to take care of himself. George hasn't been able to get it out of his head since. Amanda asks if he's suggesting the friend is behind all this somehow, but he explains that the conspiracy theory about a shadowy group of people running the world is way too easy of an explanation. The truth is much scarier. No one is in control. There's influential people who get information earlier, but the best even they can hope for is a heads up. Amanda doesn't like him anymore. George tries to win Amanda back over by showing her his music collection. He casually hits her with a, "You like jazz?" But Amanda is more interested in his daughter's collection. She puts on a song and they do some dancing. Afterwards, George realizes he probably won't see his wife ever again and breaks down. Amanda tries to comfort him, but the piercing noise starts again. As they go to sleep, Amanda notices that Archie feels a little warm. Ruth asks Dad to sleep in the bed. She's scared. She questions whether they can trust them. Amanda has been crazy from the start. Archie was sneaking pictures of her. Rose keeps staring into the woods and she's pretty sure Clay wants to sleep with her. With the world falling apart, trust shouldn't just be given out to anyone, especially white people. They're sleeping in the basement of their own home for the second night in a row. Doing the right thing is gonna screw them in the end. The next morning, Rose isn't there. Amanda asks Archie how he's feeling and he seems fine until he starts casually pulling his teeth out. Apparently they felt weird. He mentions the bug that bit him and George suggests it might be Lyme disease. Since the hospital is off limits due to the roadblock, they decide to visit the doomsday prepper Amanda saw earlier. He did some contractor work for George and doesn't live far from here. Clay still hasn't found Rose and everyone starts looking for her. Ruth discovers one of the bikes missing and Archie mentions the shed they found. He throws up some blood and off they go. They don't find Rose at the shed either. Amanda loses her composure and lashes out at Ruth. Ruth, feeling alone with only George left and unlikely to see her mom again, questions why Amanda is always so angry. Amanda's job is to understand people well enough to sell them things they don't even want. We screw each other over all the time without even realizing. People at their core are awful. Ruth agrees, but as awful as people might be, that's all they got. Clay, George and Archie arrive at the contractor's place, but he's not as friendly as George anticipated. Clay explains Archie's situation and the contractor, Danny, speculates it might be related to the noise and starts yapping about some microwave weapons used back in the day in Cuba producing radiation. Some people lost their teeth there as well. He mentions Russians recently recalling their staff from Washington and assumes it's war. George pleads for Danny's help, but Danny is more concerned about his own well-being. He suggests trying their luck at some neighbor's house who apparently have a secret bunker and asks them to leave. But George doesn't back down. He promised to get Archie help and guns are drawn. Clay does his best to reason with the man, begging for help and emphasizing that he's Archie's last hope. Meanwhile, Amanda walks out of the shed and starts following a bike trail. Ruth also walks out, but gets surrounded by deer. The final boss of deer approaches, but Amanda runs in and tries to scare them away. They're both screaming and flailing their arms erratically, being goofy goobers all around. The deer are unimpressed, but they've seen enough, so they bounce. Amanda discovers the bike trail leads to the house that Rose saw earlier. After giving them the medicine, Danny is much more friendly. He thinks it's the Koreans behind all this. Clay shows him the note with Iranian writing and Danny starts laughing. He tells them about a friend who found a similar one that was either Korean or Chinese. George thinks he's figured it all out. With his main client being in the defense sector, he has extensively studied the cost-benefit analysis of military campaigns. There was one 3-stage program that terrified him the most. Stage 1, isolation, disable their communication and transportation, to make them as deaf, dumb and paralyzed as possible. Stage 2, synchronized chaos, terrorize them with misinformation and covert attacks. Without a clear enemy, people would start turning on each other, which leads to Stage 3, civil war. It was considered the most cost-effective way to destabilize a country. At the same time, Ruth and Amanda watch in disbelief as the city is being destroyed by explosions. Meanwhile, Rose is in a neighbor's house munching on snacks. Exploring the house, she finds the bunker, fully stocked with water, plants, and abundant food reserves. But the best part? A massive movie and TV show collection, including Friends. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more videos like this.